So now that we can get started, I basically have those scans that I just did. And we need to photo merge them, and I gotta tell you, it's actually super duper easy. At least compared to what we used to do back in the day, is literally open each one, and even in Photoshop, we'd have to kind of mend them together. It wasn't always perfect, even though Bohuslav liked it a lot. But in our case, we have some tools now where we can go to File, or sorry, don't do it in QuickTime, do it in Photoshop, go to File, Automate, and Photo Merge. Pretty simple. That's pretty much all I really need to write down today, at least for photo merging, is File, Automate, and Photo Merge. And to be fair, there's actually a lot of other cool stuff that we can eventually get into, but Photo Merge is definitely one of them that I appreciate. And in my case, it's going to ask for a couple different modes. It's going to ask for all those files or scans that I looked, and then I basically press OK. That's pretty much as automatic as it gets. So we're going to browse. We're going to go find those scans that I just did and make sure my thing's all the way in. There we go, CVP. And again, I have a couple. Let's see what happens when I add the PDF. To be fair, they might work with all the updates that honestly Photoshop does every week now. It might actually work, but let's see what happens. I'm going to press OK. It's going to do its magic. It's going to look at each photo for what it is. And then it's going to try and put them together. Uh-oh. Didn't quite put them together, did it? Well, that PDF messes up some things, right? To say the very least. So let's go ahead and open them up individually. And in fact, it even opened up this one because it was like, dude, I can't even do anything with this one. And is that the PDF one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I won't even put it in there, right? And it's because it's not technically an image. You got to remember, everything actually boils down to like code when it comes to computer, and some code plays nice with other code and some code doesn't, right? So in our case, the PDF is definitely the non-player here. So in my case, I don't really need that either. And let's go ahead and at least turn that PDF into an actual file first. Mostly because that PDF had actually 2 images in it, and it probably doesn't know how to separate that, to be fair. So in our case, let's go ahead and open up each of those. Really, in this case, all we need to do is open up the PDF. When you do that, you get this option now, which is so great. And you do want to make sure that you at least have both enacted. I'm pretty sure if you just hold Shift, yeah, you can enact both. But I think it tries to make you do it one at a time, so just make sure that you get both of them. In our case, make sure you choose the resolution of 300. The reason I say that is because you kind of want those resolutions to match. Does that make sense? I wouldn't scan on my same drawing that I'm trying to photo merge. I wouldn't do one at 300, one at 200, one at 400. It would never go together, right? So make sure they're all the same DPI. So in this case, 300 is good. We'll go ahead and press OK. And it should actually open both, right? Both of those images. And I'll need to save them off as a JPEG, right? So I can either do save as or even export.
Oh, so this is if we did it.
Correct. If you accidentally did the PDF, unfortunately, Gavin, I would probably just rescan them. Otherwise, you're going to have to do this to like possibly 20 files. Now,
Yeah.
you probably didn't do that, but I've seen students in the past like, sir, can I just fix these scans? And I'm like, I guess you could, but arguably you could, in the same amount of time, rescan them.
What
So
about converting them to JPEGs?
that is possible too, yeah. So what that does is just compress it, which is essentially what it's going to do anyway. Especially if you weren't too worried about quality, that would be okay. It kind of depends on what system you do it. If you did it on Adobe Acrobat, you should probably be fine. But if you use like some browser like PDF to JPEG, I probably wouldn't do those.
I tried to do it on here, but the Adobe Acrobat wasn't letting me, or like I couldn't find the way to do it.
We can figure it out.
Yeah.
But in our case, let's go ahead and save those off. So save as. I'm just going to put it back on my drive real quick and say fixed image 1. I'm not going to make a Photoshop file, but choose JPEG. I still to this day wonder what JPEG 2000 is. It sounds cool, but please don't use it. Like, it sounds like max, right? I mean, it just sounds like so overloaded. I usually pick maximum quality. It's probably unnecessary, but it's just what I'm used to. And again, I can either export or save as. Right, so save as, in this case, JPEG. And we'll do an image 2. Part 2. And go ahead and save those off. I'll go ahead and close those. Another thing that you can do is actually open them all, and you can use your open files for Photomerge, but honestly, It can go either way. So let's now try again. Don't save that one. File, Automate, and Photomerge. Go ahead and go to Browse, and we'll go ahead and just get those JPEGs. No PDF this time. We'll set it to automatic. To be fair, you can play around with some of these. For instance, I usually actually take a bunch of photos from Google Street View, and I put them in together, and it makes a panorama, right, of an entire elevation of a facade I may need for studio, or maybe I just want to trace it. And my professors are like, "How did you do that? How did you draw the whole facade of the street?" And I say, "I just did it." Right? I don't have to tell them how I did it, right? Especially the other students. Eventually, this stuff gets pretty competitive. I will say I like to share my secrets with you guys so that you can take them on to Texas Tech and UT Austin and all these different places, and they can be an amazement of your skills, right? And you can decide to teach them if you'd like to. We'll press OK. We'll let it do its magic. Should have a lot easier time figuring it out. Of course, the stronger the computer, the faster this process is. And to be fair, well, it got some of it this time, right? Little bits. And I could show you what to do when this happens as well. So don't get me wrong, we need to make sure that, well, there just might not have been enough information in those two. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, I kind of forgot the overlapping thing. At least it's definitely noticeable in those two. However, you might notice, well, I might be able to still kind of rework that. I mean, don't get me wrong, the best solution is just go back to the scanning board and get another image or two and try the process again. Not a big deal. However, if you're like me and maybe you're usually pressed for time, very often, sometimes I'll kind of know where it's supposed to be, or maybe Gavin even knows where it's supposed to be, and I'll just go ahead and place it where it needs to be, right? There's no problem in that, right? Especially if it's something so small like that, or like this one right here. And you can find out which one is which, right? We'll take that one, Command T or Control T. That way we can transform it and basically move it around. Now, obviously, I'm guessing that it's the roof. Gavin probably knows what it actually is, but in my case, I could decide whether I'm just going to figure it out or, yeah, just get another scan of the top portion of my building. However, let's say that was perfect. I was ready to go, no big deal. I'm going to put that actually towards the top. That way it shows up on top, right? And in my case, I'm just going to right-click and merge or flatten the image. So I can either merge visible or flatten the image. Once I do that, of course, you'll see that it's more or less trying to complete the image. Now, at least for today's conversation and the tutorial, we'll just kind of assume that I got the rest of the pieces for today, right? But as you can see, in terms of the parts that it got together, pretty seamless, right? Definitely not too bad. And it could have been a couple things. I think in my case, remember how I lost track for a second talking? Be careful, don't do what I do in that regard, right? Just the technical part. But let's say that's pretty good. I'm going to hit C for crop, and I'm going to use my arrows to essentially rotate that around and maybe crop it back to some formidable size, maybe even 24 by 36 if I wanted to get back to my original. Oh yeah, I definitely messed that one up. Keep in mind, once you merge layers, you cannot move them, so be very careful. But at least for today's tutorial, let's get rid of a majority of the white space, and I can show you how to remove that white space as well. Actually, it looks kind of cool all chopped up like that.
It was, I guess it was backwards at first, because I wasn't seeing medallion.
Well, I kind of just made that up too. I mean, don't get me wrong, I just kind of flipped those real quick. I'm missing basically the top of that section. Now, don't get me wrong, I can keep this where it is right here, no big deal. I just take that piece of paper, scan it, and add that image to my Photomerge.
Oh,
Does that make sense,
like
guys?
Restart it and then
Right.
do it again.
However,
It's like
let's say...
missing a certain piece, right?
Exactly. So let's say that was the case. I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a white background. I definitely don't want these guys. I mean, that's like, oof, right? All those messy desks and all those kinds of things. So there's a couple things we can do. We can go over to Image, Adjustments, and my first tool of choice is definitely actually brightness and contrast. That's honestly one of the best tools to go to first and see how much brightness or contrast you really need. Very often I find that the smaller decisions I make in Photoshop actually have bigger differences, right? And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it's almost like less is more, not less is a bore. You guys get the architectural joke there? Less is more. Who says that? Some architectural history today. Mies van der Rohe. All right, Farnsworth House. Who says less is a bore? Which architect?
I don't know.
Nobody? Venturi. Anyway, you'll learn more, of course, in history. But in my case, I usually up or, choose the contrast that is of necessary. What's nice is it previews automatically now. That was definitely not a thing back in the day. You had to basically kind of guess and then press OK, and you'd be like, nope, I hate it, go back. And then you do it again, and you go back and do it again. So very different situation. But let's do the magic here. Usually it's Command M or Control M for curves. Again, I don't know who made these commands. Control M curves, I don't know. There's not even an M in curves. So we can also go to Image, Adjustments, and Curves. In my case, the way that this works is essentially I'm telling the computer to look at all the pixels, and I want to set a white point and a black point, right? That makes a lot of sense in a black and white drawing. So in my case, I'm going to get the white point first, and I want to pick the spot that I want to be white, right? So in this case, choosing kind of the darkness in, kind of this background right here, that's probably the spot to choose because, well, magically goes away. In fact, I could even go further and really start to eliminate some of those things. Now, I wouldn't choose these little black spots, and I'll show you why. Hopefully I can actually choose one. Keep in mind, the higher the DPI, the harder it is to select things sometimes. But it's going to maybe even remove too much, right? So be very careful. And to be fair, you can't edit undo inside of a command, so usually I have to press cancel and just try again. But in my case, we can actually get it pretty close, right? So again, I'll set my white point, and I don't want to remove too much, right? I don't want to remove the human quality that it has, but I don't also want all the human quality that it has. That's pretty safe. I mean, that's looking pretty good. I'll use my black eyedropper tool, and I'll try to select, honestly, the most dark element already in the piece. Now, if I had to guess, I'm going to say it's either this little guy right here, maybe this guy right there, arguably, maybe even that spot right there. Oh, there's a good spot right there. So let's set that as our dark point, and you'll see, oh, maybe that wasn't the best dark point. And you'll see quite immediately if you select the wrong point, right? You're like, oh my God, right? So don't get me wrong, again, the computer doesn't actually know anything. What it's doing is a set of algorithms and really code manipulations, which is why ChatGPT looks so cool, is because it's doing it so fast that it looks like it's intelligent. However, I hate to break it to you, we're gonna all still have a job. And even worse, we even have to now decipher through the hallucinations of algorithms. But hey, that's a future I'm willing to take on. So in my case, let's try curves again and get it at least somewhat close. Again, I kind of look for those gray areas, if you will.
For the white point, right?
Right. And my black point, I'm going to choose actually this spot instead. Again, I usually choose my lines and try to find a dark element in there. Again, sometimes it's too much, right? So, not the end of the world. Again, you can kind of keep clicking, especially, if it's getting worse and worse, right? But there does seem to be a point to where, to be absolutely honest with you, it's kind of hard. And actually, I had this one poetics class at Texas Tech where we did stuff like this on purpose and then used that to make an entire concept of a project. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, mistakes are cool, and I really appreciate that master's poetics class because it taught me that not everything is a mistake. But in my case, let's just use the white point because it seems to be what's working today for this drawing, and that's okay. We can always mess with some other things. But so far, so good. I mean, don't get me wrong, if I look at the screen a little bit, I can kind of tell there's still a little bit of white background, so I may want to enhance with some brightness and contrast. Right? So maybe I take down the brightness a little bit, and of course, increase or decrease the contrast. Say I just need to get rid of a line straight up, right? I mean, why not? In our case, you do want to make sure that it's an image, and it is by default. You will want to uncheck the lock because you won't be able to do anything to it if it's locked, at least in terms of erase stuff. But in my case, I can use straight up eraser tool. I can hit the letter E as an elephant or echo, and I can simply just erase it. Now, in my case, I'm like erasing like literally the paper. Anytime that you start to see the checkerboard, that is what's known as the transparency mode in a lot of different programs, actually. It's not just Adobe Photoshop, but many programs will express sort of a transparency of an object through this checkerboard format. That's definitely not what I want. In my case, I'm going to actually use a brush, and I'm going to brush the white color onto the line, effectively erasing it, right? So in my case, I'm going to edit undo that as well. I'm going to use I for eyedropper. I'm going to click on the white that I do want, and B for brush to brush what I do want. In my case, I'm going to just choose something a little simpler, something like that, and cover it. So in my case, you'll notice it's taking a little while. Well, that's because the opacity is really low. Let's choose 100%, and that should be a little easier. However, all those little markings and ticks and pieces and stuff like that might be worth your time.
Wait, what was that?
Now, how do you fix that, right? I don't know. You may even have to ask yourself, do I want to fix it? Well, yeah, I do. In my case, I can use curves again and probably get rid of a lot of things. Especially if I just keep going back and forth between brightness and contrast and the elements themselves. However, another thing too is I could use my lasso tool, draw around the object, or the area in question. Let's say I just want to make all this white. Awesome. Again, I'm just going to brush, and I don't want to be here all day brushing, so I'm going to use a big brush.
Oh, the lasso keeps it within the boundaries.
Correct. So I can draw all over I want, and it's going to match that white. Now be careful. You may notice, and the keen eye notices, right? Those are two different whites. So again, I may need a different eyedropper and get a different white. And brush, say, a new white. And of course, we can also position it as well, a little bit better. And don't get me wrong, that roof is pretty annoying, but you're going to have an excellent scan, right? Keep in mind, we don't actually need this axon for the next part, but it was a good drawing to at least go over. But if we had to take a look at the original versus this one, definitely refined, but not without losing too many things, right? Don't get me wrong, I kind of appreciate some of the errors and the human quality that it has. Otherwise, it's just going to look like a digital drawing like you saw in Photoshop today. But that's pretty good, right? So a little bit of Photomerge, a little bit of editing, at least in terms of that image. Now to get to really the part 3 that we were talking about yesterday is essentially I want you to start drawing your floor plans, your sections, and probably last but not least our 2-point perspectives, right? Now using this wonderful, accurate system that practically locks it in to place just for us, we literally can't even mess up. We can edit, undo all day long. In my case, since I'm recording right now, I'm going to go ahead and close Illustrator and Photoshop. Otherwise, my computer might have another panic attack. But in my case, I'm going to actually start a new model. Just to, you know, if it's part 3, I'd say start part 3 fresh. One thing I would be careful of is try not to do every single project that you're ever doing in an entire semester in one file. Why? What if that file gets corrupt? Suddenly, every single one of my classes, every single one of my assignments is gone, right? Another rule of thumb that I would suggest, guys, is save your files in 2 different places. Honestly, like 3 different places. If you've ever had Professor Tunks, he'll tell you right off the bat, he got his computer stolen literally from his apartment. They came in, they took his laptop. He didn't panic one bit. You know why? Whole thing was backed up in the cloud. He just had to get a new computer. Yeah, it stinks, but it's better than going through 10, 15 years of your entire architectural career, right? And honestly, I've had one student had to do that one time. It was very sad, but he also kind of took it on nicely. He's like, I didn't even like my first work. He went like back to school just to kind of do it over again. But I would hate for that to be you. Keep in mind that these are investment, and they're much more than just 56 megabytes, right? Sometimes it's our lifeblood literally in there. But so just to start us off, if we wanted to take that picture and put it into, well, I didn't even take it, but if we wanted to take that picture in there, we can type in picture. Right? And of course, put anything in there, right? So in my case, let's take one of those. We can drag it right in, right? And what's nice, at least for me, I don't know about you, but I hate going from like program to program just so I can see what I was doing. So having this kind of on the side while I make something, right? Was I telling you guys the other day how I've known some professors and some people like will make like their entire drafting table inside of the program, right? I just kind of want to show you what I mean by that. And really, before I get started with the picture, I want to type in units to make sure, again, that I'm in not millimeters, because millimeters is the default. So in my case, I do want to go to inches, or if I was building something really big, I'd go into feet. But for the sake of drawing today, inches is just fine. But let's say I wanted to get my table, my desk, if you will, and I wanted to know how big in space that really was. So I don't know, our desks in there are 48 inches by, I believe, 36. So there's the size of my desk, right? Not very big compared to the world, okay? However, if I accidentally zoom into an oblivion and I'm like, oh God, where am I? What do I do? Select everything you can. You'll usually pick up something. And then you'll go over to zoom selected, right? You could also just type in zoom selected, but it's gonna bring it right back into view. Whatever you selected, right back into view, right? So just to get a little bit started, and I know we've had a little bit of practice, obviously, with the shade and shadow. Again, thank you guys for some of you completing that wonderfully. Keep in mind, we will be talking about it first thing on Monday, right? So print out, right? We're gonna pin them up in the jury room. We're gonna definitely talk about them. I'm gonna draw all over them, right? Because usually they need it. But I want you to get that feedback. That way you know what to do and you know what to look for the next time you're in the computer. Because I will say, the computer is definitely a very forgiving world. Things look great on the computer, whereas sometimes you print them and you're like, what happened, right? So there's definitely need for that conversation. But let's say I was setting up my drawings. One of the first things I need to do for the project is actually draw my floor plans. So as I was mentioning in previous assignments, I may want to actually get familiar with the layers first. So in my case, I already have some default layers. In my case, maybe I want some walls. So I'm gonna right click and rename. Usually you can actually double click on it, by the way. I'm not sure why mine's not working. To be fair, when I screen record, some things do fall off. But let's get some walls. I know I'm gonna need some stairs. Oh, don't delete it. Why is delete next to rename? I'll never know. Delete, rename. Kind of two different things there. We'll get some stairs. I don't know, what else will I need? Maybe columns? Yeah. And so on and so forth. Obviously, if I wanted windows, I could, of course. But again, the reason I do this, guys, is I really wish somebody would have told me, stay as organized as you can as possible. And I think, especially if you're already doing exercise 5 right now, you see the benefits of layering all your layers, right? Line weight 1, line weight 2, line weight 3, and hatches and poche. You can even have several layers of hatching and poche, right? You can color coordinate it in Rhino, and then of course be on your way, right, for Illustrator. Relatively speaking, you should only spend about 2 or 3 minutes in Illustrator if you're doing the Rhino work right. Again, we draw only in Rhino, at least until I teach you in Graphics 4 that you can technically draw in Illustrator too, but it's a little bit more advanced, and it's a lot cooler on the Wacom anyway. So, that being said, let's go ahead and draw some things, right? Honestly, we'd start off just like as if we were on our drafting table, guys. I'd maybe select walls or, whatever component that I was going to draw. And to be fair, I can even change the lines after I draw them. But in my case, I may want to draw everything to scale. Well, if I draw 25 feet, what happens? Oh, shit. Excuse my language. That is 25 feet, and I do want to follow the rules. So, well, I need to make things 1-to-1 scale in the digital realm, right? So everybody drawing their perspectives or their floor plans or their sections or anything like that, draw it at the true scale of the object. In our case, that would mean that 25 by 25 or 30 by 30, and we can start with those things. However, there goes my desk, right? Because, well, my desk is really little compared to that 25 by 25. So again, not a big deal. I could just make a bigger desk. We can undo that and just make a bigger desk. And don't get me wrong, there's something about framing your stuff that really kind of helps the mind. For instance, have you guys ever opened up a fridge door or gone through a regular door and been like, why did I get here? Right, you suddenly forget as soon as you open the door. Well, some would actually suggest that doors, portals, are actually very much connected to you. There's a reason why your mind seems to change when you enter the room, or he or she just really lightens up the room, and it's usually something to do with that architectural door. So one thing that I would suggest, if you're kind of an ADD mind like myself, contain yourself, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And very often I actually keep them in like multiple steps, right? I'll have multiple kind of boxes for myself, like, hey, this is my sketch box, this is my final box, right? And again, it's like having 2 desks now, right? So in our case, let's go ahead and start the floor plan, at least for today. I know I have about 30 minutes. I'm sorry I talk so much, but I do. But in our case, let's go ahead and start drawing. So walls, I'm going to draw a rectangle, or type in rectangle. And essentially I want a 30 feet, enter, by 30 feet. And it looks like I'm going to need a bigger desk. And that's okay, because we can. In my case, I'm probably going to make it closer to the size of like my paper on that desk. And again, not a big deal. But now we've got 25 feet by 25 feet. And relatively speaking, like, no matter how when you zoom in or zoom out, there's a weird thing in digital scale. There's no real way to know how big or small something is, right? Because I can instantly change it in seconds, right? Whereas in the real world, I mean, you definitely have a physical property with something, like, you know, being able to see the words on the screen versus not, right? So keep that in mind. There is definitely a huge difference between the digital realm. But in our case, we can use a couple things. Maybe I need to offset it. Maybe I want some 6-inch walls. Awesome. So I'm going to decide out or in, out or in. I'm going to go in. So I've already got some walls just like that. I'm going to go ahead and start my stairs. So I'm going to switch to my stairs. I'm going to draw another rectangle. After all, maybe I want 4 by 4 feet stairs. I'm going to draw 4 feet, enter, 4 feet, enter. Don't really want it there, so I'm going to move it, and move, right? I could work harder, I could work smarter, I'm not sure. I'm going to go ahead and explode this. Take this step. This will act as my first landing, so I don't really actually need those first 4. And I don't know, maybe I want a door. So I'm going to go ahead and add a door. My door, I want it to be about 3 feet wide, so I'm going to offset it 3 feet. Definitely not that way. I'm going to go that way. And just to kind of help myself out, I'm going to go ahead and trim it up. So TRIM, enter, and I'm going to click on what I don't want. Suddenly I've got a door. Next thing, well, I could copy this over and over and over again, right? I could just go 12 inches, right? Because that's the size of my treads, right? And I could just keep copying. One thing I could do is also copy it from another point, right? So I can copy that point. You guys see what I'm doing there?
Yeah.
Using the previous one. However, be careful, because if you get one wrong, the rest become wrong. So there are kind of little tips and tricks that we can do in the computer that are really nice. Another thing that we could do is array it. However, it requires a little bit of math. Obviously my X direction, Y direction, and Z direction towards me, right? So in my case, maybe I know the number of stairs that I need. I'm going to say 12, right? I need 12 stairs. Enter. In the Y direction, I just need 1. And in the Z direction, I just need 1. So in my case, it's going to ask, okay, well, what do you want to do? Okay, well, how far do you want them? I want them 12 inches. Perfect.
Yeah.
Enter. So don't get me wrong, if you know some of the things about your project already, awesome, right? You can absolutely kind of draw without even drawing, right? But in our case, let's keep going. And very often I just use rectangles until I make it, guys. I'll use my smart tools, right? And I'll type in 4 feet. And there's my landing. I could draw a line to continue, right? And I could basically finish my stairs. Oh, what else could I do? I could do annotations. I could also spell annotations correctly, but that's okay. I'm going to choose white so I can see it a little bit better. I'm going to type in line. I kind of want to midpoint it there, you know what I mean? I want it to look nice. So I'm going to go and click midpoint. It's going to find my midpoint for me. Oh, I don't want that layer, so I'm going to double click to enact that layer. And basically just draw an arrow. Boop. No, it's not a break. I'm going to mirror it. It's my arrow.
Oh.
I could join it. right? Because, I mean, right now it's just a bunch of, like, separate lines. If I accidentally move this, I'm going to be like, ooh, there goes my arrow, right? So maybe I want to take the whole thing and join it. I'm going to type in join, enter. Comes one piece. Well, it's going to join things that are joinable, right? So in my case, if I run across something that is not joinable, and the reason it's not joinable is because it doesn't complete the circuit, right? It's sort of adding itself. It's being like a third wheel there. But that's okay. We can select both and we can group them. Enter. And that's pretty sweet. The only thing not sweet about groups is once something is grouped, you either have to ungroup it or you'll realize that commands don't seem to work on them so well, right? Sometimes they do, like trim usually works, but if you're trying to extend the line, sometimes it won't do it because it's considering the whole, right? So one thing that we could do is ungroup it. I know it sounds so intuitive. Ungroup, right? Just in case that was the case. Another thing, I'm going to switch that back to group, bless you. Once something is grouped, it's kind of nice. I can change that all in one time. And to be fair, I don't even need to draw arrows and arrows over again because I can just copy them over and over again. Again, one of the strongest suits of any digital program is its ability to replicate your objects. Keep that in mind. When in doubt, if you're finding yourself drawing things over and over again, you're not doing it right. Right? So, don't get me wrong, you have to draw things once, but, you know, definitely not over and over again.
Super Red.
Yes?
I was curious if there's like a way, like, so, because I found myself like making lines and then I was like, I wouldn't remember if like, oh, if I put the right dimensions in there. Is there like a measuring tool?
Absolutely, and that's a great question. The measuring tool is called DIM for dimension. So I'll type in DIM, enter. I'll click on it and go, whoa, that's 1,219 millimeters. Well, I don't need that. So in my case, I'll go to dim, and there should be something called dim style. If you don't have dim style, might be set dim. Usually these are components, right? And we can change it from millimeters to another predestination. Now, by default, sometimes you do actually have to change the settings. Once somebody changes the settings, it kind of stays there, which is kind of nice. But in order to change those settings, because 1,219 millimeters, it's kind of hard to read unless you're like in Canada all the time. But in our case, we could go to File, we'd go to Settings, and we'd go to Annotation Styles. Once we go to there, obviously, instead of millimeter small, we're going to change it to something more architectural. So in our case, dimensions, right? We do want to make sure that we change some things. Is it annotate length unit? Yeah. So instead of millimeters, we want inches and we want fractional. Right? So definitely, so it stays in something a little bit more architectural. Of course, I mean, this is very customizable, but what's nice about this is I only have to change it once. But that should be good there, right? So you don't have to hit save or anything, and bam, 48 inches, right? So don't get me wrong, it's still in inches. Well, can I switch it to feet? Yeah, you could. Oh, not export selected. Settings. Arrows, you can even change the arrows, how big they are. So I mean, some of that's really cool, especially if you need to dimension things. To be fair though, I'm not finding what I'm looking for here. Inches, fractional, let's go to feet. Feet and inches, there we go. And right away, 4 feet, right? So that was DIM, and a wonderful question, Gavin. So we can definitely do those things, and I would recommend that you do them to your drawings, right? I mean, why not? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Now, I mean, we got to change some things. What's kind of nice about this, though, is I can explode it to its simplest parts. Once I explode it, though, it kind of stays there. It doesn't actually change or anything, right? Whereas if I change it before I explode it, it actually will change the number. It's kind of neat. So if I change this point right here and move it, yes, oh, it's okay. It should actually change the dimension. So definitely a great question, Gavin. Can we check our drawings? Absolutely. However, from here, I need to draw every floor plan, guys. So first floor, second floor, third floor, and eventually, of course, the section, elevation, and 2-point perspective. Now I'm going to go ahead and get started in the 2-point perspective just because, well, it's so easy on this. And, well, we're probably going to have a part 3 on this one next week. Keep in mind we still have 2 weeks to get through this, and I don't want to give you guys too much before you're like just overwhelmed with stuff. Now, of course, Isaiah and Jennifer, they're probably like, man, you can't stop me, right? You know, already ready to go. So hopefully they're well on their way, and I would ask of them to, of course, help your neighbors as well. I'm trying to think of other things that you might need this weekend in order to draw your floor plans. Keep in mind, again, we could still use hatch in order to poche. However, it will poche everything, right? Unless you're in some sort of boundary mode. Enter. And of course we can do so. So hopefully nice, but hopefully now with some practice, especially with the shade and shadow, you should have absolutely no issue making your floor plans. In fact, I have a feeling some of you are going to be like, holy moly, this is way easier than actually drafting, way more accurate. But the struggle will be, how do I make it appear as human as the wonderful lines that Sadie created, right? Or the wonderful lines that Gavin created, or all of you guys have made in your analog studies, right? We all know what it takes to make that line perfect, and it's definitely not just like not looking at it, right? Don't get me wrong, some aspects get easier in the digital realm, whereas some come particularly harder. Now, if I wanted to give it sort of a human quality, what I would do is actually mess it up a little bit. I'd explode it, take my curves, and quite literally mess them up a little bit. After all, nobody would really know, but they're going to subconsciously pick up some of those mistakes and errors. I know I've probably explained it before, guys, but one of the best ways I can explain it is Toy Story 1 versus Toy Story 4. There's a reason Toy Story 4 looks better, and it's not just because it's newer and has more graphics or better computers. It's because actually what they did was make the characters and the objects and the textures and the materials actually imperfect. They added bumps, they added scratches, they added all the dirt, the weathering of the plastic, all those things that actually make something look more real. Why? Because reality is actually chaotic. It's not perfect at all. In fact, if you were to zoom in onto anything in nature, you'd realize, oh my God, there's like chaos. There's stuff eating each other all over the place, right? So what I'm trying to say is, well, inherently the computer makes things quote unquote perfect. If you take a look at Toy Story 1, it looks really clean, right? Almost too clean, almost as if the people no longer look very realistic because they look so clean. In fact, you may have wondered, or you may have seen it actually yourself in Toy Story 1 where Andy's having his birthday party and they all run down the stairs. Those are all Andys in different colors. Watch the movie again, right? You think they're different kids, but they're actually just all different color Andys, right? And it, again, your mind definitely picked up something was off, but you didn't necessarily see that until somebody, of course, points it out. What I'm trying to say is very often, in order to get a human quality in the digital realm, we have to make some mistakes. So I'll leave it at that for today, unless there are some particular questions. Some of you guys, some really great questions, and really glad to get that on the recording. So well done. Any others, though? Fair enough to get started? Let's draw those floor plans.